Hey everybody, this is Modern Refugee. I'm going to jump into the old cookbooks here today, but it's not really so much recipes that I'm going to read to you guys and show you guys how to do. It's going to be notes that were put in here for processing meat. And these notes would have came from my grandfather on my mother's side. They're the ones that had the farm that I've talked to you guys with before, and they processed most of their own meat, as many of the old farmers did around here. And I think there's a lot of information in these notes that's valuable. Some of the stuff that they talk about in here is too large a scale for me to actually do and show you guys, but I think that value can be gotten from these notes, so you guys can copy these things down, and then you can look at the information and determine how it could benefit you, and you can experiment a little bit on the ingredients and the recipes and stuff that are in here. Now, my grandparents, I remember this, I was very young, but they would butcher in the fall, and they would put a lot of meat up in the smokehouse. They would make hams, bacon, sausage, summer sausage, these kind of things. They would lard meat in crocks, and basically the smokehouse was their cold storage. That's where they stored a majority of their meat. And there were other farmers and stuff, and relatives of farmers that I talked with around here that they would literally pressure can an entire steer. And there's one woman in particular that I'm thinking of here. She was younger at the time. She's older now, but they literally, when they butchered in the fall, they pressure canned 400 pounds of beef. And, do the math on that. About 2 pounds of raw meat into a quart can. So you're looking at 200 quart cans. The pressure canners at the time held maybe 6 quarts if they were lucky. In a 90 minutes per processing time on each canner full, even with 2 canners going, it was a significant amount of time that they processed this beef. And she said they didn't even have a freezer. They didn't have a freezer at all. That was kind of like before freezers. So, they pressure canned everything and they cured everything. But the notes out of these books here, I'm going to read to you. And like I said, these have been I got 3 different books here, but they're all basically the same. And a lot of the stuff was recopied off of what my grandfather said. And then there's some kind of addendums on some of this stuff. But this is what it says. It says, for smoked meat, 9 pounds of salt for 100 pounds of meat. Salt bacon, 24 to 36 hours. Salt hams and shoulders, 3 to 4 weeks. And then it gives a brine recipe, what they're talking about. It says, boil water and cool. Add salt to dissolve in the water and cover the meat with the brine and weigh down. And then it has here, the woods that they preferred for smoking. And this is how it's written. For woods, use white ash, cherry, maple, hickory, plum, peach, and corncob. Dad used a lot of corn cobs. And sometimes they would even leave some corn on the corn cobs when they would smoke, because that would add added sweetness to the meat. And white ash is the first one that's mentioned on here. And white ash, we had a plague that went through and killed all the white ash trees here in lower Michigan several years back now, but I've used a lot of white ash in smoking. And white ash is very similar to hickory in its taste and flavor. And white ash, because there's so much of it dead around here, it's the most inexpensive here in southern Michigan wood that you could possibly use to smoke meat. And then it says, let meat dry off 1 day and then start smoking. It says, smoke over a slow fire. Be careful so the smoke fire isn't too hot. And as far as temperatures go, my interpretation of that is cold smoke. They cold smoke stuff. So you're looking at probably 130 degrees if you want, my opinion on that. And anything like bacon and hams, shoulders, what they would call picnics, they they would be cold smoked. And it says smoke hams, get this, 10 to 12 days. So that's how long that they would keep a low smoke on this. And I remember Grandma saying that if the fire went out a little bit for a few hours, like overnight or whatever, they just went out first thing in the morning and they would refire that back up so the cold smoke would continue on that. But the 10 to 12 days, that probably wasn't the constant smoke. That was how my grandmother said she would take, if it went out for a little bit because they were doing chores or this or that, they would just fire it back up then again. And it says bacon and sausage, 8 to 10 hours. And sausage goes a lot by color. And the sausage they're talking about here would have either been like cased sausage, like what you would think of as a kobazzi or a kielbasa, and or a summer sausage that would have been packed in like muslin bags, the cloth bags to smoke, and a lot of that went by color. You wanted a dark brown chestnut color on the outside of that. I have done like primitive sausage videos already before where I've showed that, but you want that dark brown kind of chestnut color on the outside of that. And then underneath it has fish. You want a hot fire to cook the oil out, and fish is a hot smoke, and you would want that 180 degrees probably, or maybe even slightly over that, because you want that fish to not only smoke but cook, because fish is sort of a different thing entirely from your pork and stuff. And then we have underneath here, we have brines for smaller amounts of meat, 100 pounds of meat, 9 pounds of salt, 50 4.5, 25, 2 1/4, and then 12 and a half pounds of meat. It says 1 1/8 pound of salt. And then there's also, there is some recipes in here. There's also a list of seasonings that they used for seasoning their meat, for making their different sausages. And we have salt, pepper, white pepper, cinnamon, cardamom, allspice. Cardamom is a type of almost like a cinnamon, I guess is the closest I can describe it. Allspice, cloves, summer savory, and paprika. And then there's also kind of an addendum on here that mentions thyme and marjoram. Well, marjoram is one of the main seasonings in a Polish sausage, like a kielbasa and Hungarian kobazzi. That's all going to have it's going to have your marjoram in it. And summer savory is another one that's on here. You don't see that much anymore. Summer savory is very similar to like thyme. In fact, it even looks like thyme when it's growing. I've actually grown it here already several times. But the varieties of summer savory that you can get now compared to the ones that the old timers had don't grow quite as good as I remember it. I can grow it, but it's not. Thyme is a fairly decent substitute for that. And then liver sausage is another one. And the liver sausage that they made isn't liver sausage like what we think of liver sausage today, almost like a pate that's been cased. Their liver sausage, and I remember this growing up, their liver sausage was like a bulk sausage, almost like a bulk pork sausage, what you get to make, breakfast sausage. And they made that with what they called salvage meat. And basically what salvage meat was everything that was basically considered a scrap. So, they cut out their loins, they made their sausage, they did their hams, they smoked their pork shoulders, but all the trimmings and stuff like the liver, that the organ meat and stuff, that was the stuff that was all ground up, and the bits of fat and stuff that was on the hog, all that stuff would have been ground up, and then they would have added seasonings to that, and they would have used that, and that was actually what they called liver sausage. And the liver sausage, I remember having it as a kid, and it was great. It was better than any real, pork sausage that you would buy today at a store. It had a little bit different taste because of the organ meat, but it wasn't bad. It didn't have that. The other scraps and pieces of meat that were in there, they kind of dampened down the real intense flavor of the organ meat, like liver. And while I don't like liver, I always like these old liver sausage recipes. And that is, the basics of this of these books here. And another one that they have on here another seasoning is sage. But sage, like now you'll see bulk pork sausages, they'll say sage pork sausage, but sage wasn't used as strongly as it is kind of today in the different pork sausages that you get. Sage was sort of in the middle of the list as far as the ingredients. It wasn't one of the, sage was something that was added in slightly, and they would grow their own sage and they would just rub it and they would put it up, and then they would add that in when they wanted sage, just like they would the summer savory and the marjoram and stuff too. But the cinnamon, the cardamom, the allspice, you wouldn't think of that stuff being in sausages, but it was actually very, very common in sausages around here to add those spices in along with the herbs. Garlic was another thing. Garlic was added in certain sausages, but not in all sausages. And they would sometimes crush the garlic up. They would put a little water in it and actually even ferment that slightly. And they would add sometimes they wouldn't add the whole bits of garlic in. They would add that liquid in off those fermented garlic cloves into the sausage. And then they would go ahead and they would smoke that. So there's different ways that they went about doing that stuff. And this is the stuff here that's in these notes. And like I said, I don't really have the facilities to make these larger amounts of meat, but I thought that these notes were important and somebody could get some benefit out of them if they raise their own animals for meat purposes. So anyway, this is Modern Refugee. Appreciate all my subscribers out there. Hope you guys got a little information and a little entertainment out of this video here. Kind of just going off of some of my grandparents' notes that they had written down on how the old timers processed meat. Anyway, you guys have a good one.